What's going on, Workforce? Brian here, and we've got some New World MMO news to talk about today. Namely, this is coming from two official tweets from the New World Twitter account, and it's going to deal a little bit with PvP and war that's coming, more information coming in January, and also that there seems to be a magical element coming to the game. Originally, they talked about how the magical element's going to all be in the crafting and the weapons, but let's go ahead and start it off with the tweet from December 30th saying, "Not all weapons are steel and wood. Master the arcane arts to help push back the corrupted." And it shows this wizardy looking style character wielding this kind of magical fist. And this makes me first start to question, like, how much of the game that we're going to be getting is going to be different from what has been sold to the community that has so been following this game up to this point. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, because we have a new tweet coming from January 3rd saying, "Strong walls and gates won't hold forever. Take the fight to other players as well as to the corrupted." More information on PvP and war coming in January. Obviously, it's January, and we are just waiting for just the rollout of news, because overall, when you go look at like the Reddit that's kind of populating, there's a lot of sentiment about people who are frustrated or concerned about what this could mean. So Slurp says, "The fact that they haven't just come out and said already, that makes me think that they're trying to figure out how to spin the removal of Sandbox PvP in a positive way." And then Earl0900 follows it up and says, "If they decide to remove the Sandbox PvP from the game, it will lose a lot of what gives the game its originality and what is making people interested in a fresh take on the genre." And Bold Gog says, "100% MMOs are about human interaction with other players. Storylines and PvP is just the filler between the lines. Keep us playing in the downtime and the next interaction with a player, group, or guild. I think stalling has more to do with them giving them time to make sure their final tests are to make their final choices in the direction of this game. Why commit to something if it isn't fun at the end of the day? You would be publicly executed if promised one thing and changed it right before launch." So I want to kind of talk about the changing anything before launch from a development perspective. That does happen, but it is costly. It can be we've seen it happen multiple times, and it often doesn't necessarily work out. But there's a theme here that's running within the community that's really kind of about what is sold and what isn't sold. Now, obviously, when we talk about New World here on Worked Game, there is a big PvE community here. And as a PvP player and somebody who really enjoys that kind of content, I know it's not for everybody. And so for me, when I'm starting to look at this, I'm starting to see the concept of the business versus the art, the business and the game. Because if in their alpha testing, something proved to not actually be fun, it could be easily said and put on paper and in a design and saying, "Hey, this is what we want to do." And everybody could say, "Man, that sounds like a lot of fun." And then they go put it into practice, and it doesn't end up being what they wanted it to be. People don't play it the way that maybe they should play it. It doesn't equal fun. Yeah, I think ultimately that's where you have to make those kind of changes. And I think ultimately that's where you also want to kind of hold the cards closer to your chest. Because at this point, until they're actually ready to show off what it means, like with actual gameplay and how that's going to be balanced and how they're going to, I guess make it fun, you run a risk of obviously setting expectations. And that's kind of what we're seeing here with Slurp's comment, saying like the removal of Sandbox PvP. And this is all coming, if you're not aware, from comments and the information that they're going to give people the ability to toggle in and out of PvP. And what originally I think people were excited about is kind of this open world survival MMO RPG that you could just be a scoundrel and go and attack. And if people can toggle out of that, that kind of removes the illusion. If you wanted to be that scoundrel and it turns out you can't attack that person because they have opted out of PvP, that can kind of, I guess, affect your game, even if that's the way you're choosing to play it and somebody else is trying to choose to play it differently. And thus the argument has come up is like, why not just make separate style servers? One where that is an option and one where that isn't, so that a player can choose to opt in and out. And the thing is, the most critical and important piece about all of this is that we still don't have any application, any solid, like definitive, like this is how it's going to be and this is why. And this is where marketing comes into play and where patience is a virtue, but it's also incredibly frustrating because our expectations, especially from a gamer's perspective, I do this all the time. I can get my hopes up, I can be excited, it's going to be this, it's going to be this, and I can easily outspend and outdevelop in my mind and in my imagination than the time it's going to take to make these things come together. Now, we open this talking about magic, and this is kind of interesting for me because if anybody here has been following the channel for any period of time, they'll know that like I am a caster at heart. I love playing casters in Phantasy Star Online 2. I'm playing Force in Final Fantasy XIV. I love to play Black Mage. I used to love to play Summoner and Red Mage, but that's maybe another video for another day. So when they started talking about how magic would like work in the game as a part of the marketing material and the information we've had at this point, it was interesting. It's like, okay, you can craft magical weapons, but everything seemed very set and based in reality. And now with the potential for a magic wielding class, that actually has me more excited than ever before, namely because maybe then here in this game, I can play as a caster. And what's really going to be interesting about this, and here's where my excitement starts to run wild. So note that this is speculation. Welcome to Speculation Town. That's stupid. Welcome to the Speculation Zone. I like Zone better. All right, so we're in the zone now. There is collision-based, the game is collision-based. If as a caster, as a ranged player, if I can be surrounded by friends who can shield me physically from oncoming attacks, oh baby. That can be a game changer. That could be so integral to the strategy. Because typically when you talk about casting, when you talk about magic, you are that glass cannon. There is a trade-off, right? Because you can't be all powerful and, invincible, right? Because then everybody would play that and the game would not be fun. So what's the trade-off? Well, the trade-off is that you're easy to kill. Well, if you're easy to kill, that means you have to get to me. So that could be something really interesting to see where, from a tanking perspective, going away from the holy trinity of the tank, the healer, and the DPS that has so dominated the last decade of MMOs, into a new style in which that tanking actually is a matter of being physically present. Like when I go and look at just The Lord of the Rings, when you go watch the movie, like everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. The characters all have their strengths and weaknesses. Sometimes tanking is just being an obstacle so that the monster cannot, or the other player cannot easily get to a path in which that they can attack you. Distance matters. Things that fall in between matter, and that's something that can be used as an advantage to the caster. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see what skills are ultimately present. Obviously, there's still much we can speculate. And obviously, this has me really excited. I talked earlier about why I've decided to pre-order this game. There's a couple other MMOs on the horizon. But 2020 and going forward this decade, there's a lot of stuff that seems to be very interesting in terms of the technology behind MMOs and how they could be used to reinvigorate the entire genre as a whole. Obviously, we're going to have to wait and see. There are no guarantees. Launching an MMO has always been really hard because people like to default back onto their roots. That's one of the reasons why World of Warcraft is still so popular despite how well or not well BFA was received. You can see that. You can see Final Fantasy XIV still incredibly popular and growing, year over year. And yet that game is also going to be celebrating its 10-year anniversary. So it's going to take something special to, shake up the genre, shake up the industry. And I believe it's technology. I believe it's when we're talking about, 5,000 players and 10,000 players on a server, player trade and more. I think that we're going to see it based in what they can do now that they could never really do before and had to kind of short circuit the system before. And anyway, that's a bigger video. That's a bigger conversation. But I'd love to know your thoughts when it comes to New World, when it comes to using magic, when it comes to, obviously, PvP and this war concept that they're going to be sharing with us very soon. Obviously, I'm going to be talking about it here on the channel. So if you have any questions, let me know in the comments below what questions you have about this game. I know that when we talk about PvP, some people perk up and are excited. and some people aren't. And there's another element to PvP that I've been talking about recently, and maybe it deserves its own video, but as an aside, like what I'm hoping for in these games is that PvP isn't just me versus you, but it's my army versus your army, my guild versus your guild, my crafters versus your crafters, that there is an element that as we work and as we build and as we grow, we live together and we die alone, that there's this sense of survival that, like in this real world, that we are connected and we might never see each other, we might never touch each other, but we have an impact on each other each and every day. And that's kind of where, when I look at PvP, it's like, sure, I like, especially in an action MMO, that me versus you, that test of skill, that test of, real-time thought. That can be really exciting, and it can be very emotional, and it can be very engaging, especially whether you're watching or you're playing. And we talked about that in a previous video, talking about how it's going to be integrated with Twitch in certain ways, and how that can be both concerning and exciting. But as we go into 2020, just note that, New World MMO, it's something that has piqued my interest. Kind of came out of nowhere, so I'm kind of getting caught up on all that's been said, and I think that's kind of one of the reasons why personally I might not necessarily be so frustrated if they make a change, because I wasn't sold something like a year ago or 2 years ago, and they've been making changes and they kind of went quiet. And I think that's hopefully coming down into the idea that, hey, this is what we wanted to do, and it turns out it wasn't fun. It's fun and sounds interesting on paper, but it's just not fun. You gotta find the fun, and they have to launch a solid game. And they launch an incredibly fun and solid game, people will show up to play it. And I don't think the math gets simpler. And if it's a bad game, people are going to look back at this and say, well, if they had only made the game that they said they were originally going to make, that's why it failed. And I don't think that's necessarily justified either. But it's a complex issue, and again, like I said, I'd love to know your thoughts. And with that, let's wrap up this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have an incredible weekend. This has been Brian for Work to Game. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and we'll see you soon. Take care.